Hello, true duelists. It's YGO Strats Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, where I'm going to be talking about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the other ones that failed miserably and don't deserve videos, but I'm making them anyways, because somebody has to, or something. Either way, today's card, the first rescue card to not define a format, it's Rescue Hamster. Hamster was first released in the New Challengers in 2014 as a super rare, with 2 reprints to date as of this video. The first came in the New Challengers Special Edition as a super rare once again, and again in the Pendulum Evolution Booster Pack in 2017, once again as a super rare. As of this video, it has spent no time on the ban list. A level 4 Earth Attribute Beast type Pendulum monster with 300 attack and 100 defense. Its Pendulum scale is 5 and its Pendulum effect reads: you can banish this card from your Pendulum zone, add 2 face-up Pendulum monster cards with the same name from your extra deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Rescue Hamster once per duel. And its monster effect, which reads: if this card was normal summoned this turn and you have a face-up level 5 or lower Pendulum monster in your extra deck, you can tribute this card. Choose one face-up level 5 or lower Pendulum monster card in your extra deck and special summon 2 monsters from your deck with the same name as that card, but they have their effects negated and they are destroyed during the end phase. I mentioned it briefly in my Rescue Ferret video, but Rescue Hamster was the third in the line of rescue monsters released into the game. The first 2, Cat and Rabbit, were strong meta contenders in their times that had their own respective decks in Synchro Cat and Dino Rabbit. So when the community first heard of a third rescue monster for the new Pendulum era, there was some level of expectation that it would be broken in some regard, or at the very least abusable. Hell, it even has a pendulum effect, unlike its predecessors, meaning it could have more than just the use of normal summon +1 that the other 2 had before it. The issue was, unlike his 2 companions before him, Hamster wasn't unique just for being a pendulum monster, it was also unique for needing setup before being usable. Rescue Cat and Rescue Rabbit could both be your normal summon and turn themselves into a free synchro or Xyz play all by themselves, as the very first thing you did in the duel if you wanted to. But Hamster's effect requires you to already have a Pendulum monster face up in your extra deck to get its 2-for-1 effect. This isn't terrible, and in the context of Master Rule 3, it makes sense. If you're someone who started playing after July of 2017, you maybe don't know this, but when Pendulums were first introduced, they didn't need Link Arrows or the extra monster zone to summon themselves from the extra deck. A player could just summon 5 monsters for free every turn as long as they had the zones and scales for it, and it was very abusable and, in all honesty, kind of broken and just desperately needing a fix as time has gone on. Anyway, given Hamster was printed at a time where this was the case, if it could just on summon get 2 monsters for free from the deck, use them as the materials for something else, and then you can pendulum summon those 2 monsters again for free, it probably would have been completely absurd. That is 4 monsters off of just 1 normal summon, and that's no good. So to balance this card around the new free soul charge mechanic Konami had just given us, they made Hamster require some degree of setup and restricted it to level 5 or lower monsters, I guess for future-proofing against Astrograph Sorcerer or something, but not really, since Hamster was also nerfed compared to its predecessor since it was the first to negate the effects of what it summoned. Pre-Errata Cat didn't exist at this point. Now, this is for the best in the long term and would track with its co-worker, seeing as Cat's Errata did make it negate the effects and Ferret negates the effects of what it summons as well, but that's all to say that in terms of the abusable series of rescue cards, Hamster was the first one to feel like a letdown of sorts. Its pendulum effect was similarly kept in check. Not only does it banish itself for cost, so as to prevent you from using it as free material for an extra Xyz or Synchro summon after you already +1 off of it, but that's without mentioning its recovery effect is once per duel, not once per turn. A true one-and-done performance from the Rope Rat here. That joke's gonna age really poorly if/when we get a Rescue Rat someday. It also ages poorly when you use your eyes and see that it is a hamster in both name and appearance and not a rat, but I don't care, it has a rope and I went for the alliteration. Funnily enough, the recovery effect it has in the pendulum scale is probably the one that got better with time, and arguably would have needed limiting otherwise, seeing as recovering pendulums from the face-up extra deck to your hand is far more abusable in Master Rule 4 and beyond, allowing you to summon more monsters off a pendulum summon without eating up your precious link zones or extra monster zone. Now, being honest, I remember this card doing literally nothing at any point. And broadly speaking, compared to some of the other cards in the game, and especially compared to the Cat and Bunny, this card did very little. But that's not to say that it did nothing, and I was somewhat surprised to find it does have a handful of spots in decks that topped throughout the years. As to why I remember it doing nothing, that's because it took 2 years to find a home in a deck that was played to a successful level. As I made a joke about earlier, Ignites did play it often enough in early builds, and it got a top 8 in an Ignite deck at the 2015 Las Vegas Regionals. But that was all it could muster in a format with Nekroz, Shadal's, Burning Abyss, and the then new Cosmo. And once Pepe, the Pendulum Tier 0 deck came around, this card really fell out of the limelight. It did pop back up in the remnants of Pepe once that deck was hit, however, showing up in some Draco Pal lists as a 3-of, with Pendulum decks getting easy access to cards like Wavering Eyes, as well as things like Draco Face-Off, Performapal's Pendulum Sorcerer effect to pop your own cards to help plus, and even things like Performapal Lizard Draw, just destroying itself, meant that it was not hard to get a Pendulum monster face-up in the extra deck. And with Master Pendulum giving players access to Dynaster, it could reliably open up a wide number of plays. Granted, I could only find 5 tops for decks playing Hamster, but it was still a cute tech in some meta builds. It would next see play in Metal Foe decks, which makes sense because with Metal Foe scales popping each other all the time, it was all but certain that an opening turn would leave you with a monster face up in your extra deck. Hell, depending on the opening turn, it could sometimes be possible to open both Rescue Rabbit and Hamster, and use both their effects by normal summoning Hamster and then Pendulum summoning the bunny later. And if you could fuse a Metal Foe monster before your Pendulum, it could be off to the races. The last time Rescue Hamster saw play in a topping deck list was in a few Pendulum Magician decks back in 2018, as well as some Metal Foe True Draco decks. And Metal Foe True Draco, it's because Metal Foe monsters again put themselves easily into the face-up extra deck, and with Metal Foe's access to continuous trap cards, you can just summon Masterpiece, and that's what that deck was trying to do, and Hamster was just a solid Metal Foe card at that time. And in terms of the Pendulum Magician decks, the newly released Metal Foe's Electromite comboed pretty well with this card. Electromite's ability to put a Pendulum monster from your main deck into your face-up extra deck could immediately give you a target for your Rescue Hamster if you could make Electromite without using your normal summon. And even better, you could use Metal Foe Electromite's effect to destroy one of your other scales to recover the Rescue Hamster from extra deck to your hand, so as to use Rescue Hamster's Pendulum effect, recover some cards to your hand, and get an even bigger Pendulum summon. Special mention especially would go to Harmonizing Magician, as it can only be Pendulum summoned from the hand anyways. Since then, it hasn't shown up at any top tables from what I've been able to find. It makes enough sense. Pendulum has fallen off of the competitive scene ever since the banning of Electromite, and generic Pendulum good stuff decks have a lot more to consider for getting free monsters on board these days, with or without setup beforehand. Things like Chronograph Sorcerer, Abyss Actor Curtain Raiser, Supreme King Dragon Darkworm, the Mythical Beast package, and countless other Pendulum engines and generic good cards just to use to make generic end boards. Overall, Rescue Hamster is the first modern rescue card, one that actually had some amount of forethought put into its effects, and one that isn't a free plus all by itself. That isn't to say it's a bad card. It can be used to get some easy advantage, and can even recover cards from your extra deck to make some solid plays turn after turn. But it has some steep competition for its slot in decks, and due to its limit to only summon Pendulum monsters, can't find a place as a Hamster deck as easily as its rescue buddies have in the past. But with all that being said, it's not a bad card to fool around with, especially if you're looking for other ways to add some spice to whatever Pendulum decks you're interested in. And so, that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, Rescue Hamster. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats, so you too can become a true duelist.